Hello everyone, it's Elbone here. So today I'm going to try and do a quick guide on the Void Warlock subclass, Voidwalker. I'm going to try and keep this guide as quick as possible while still retaining the in-depth information that I usually give. Here at the Elbone channel, we like to give you numbers because Bungie doesn't. So before we get into specific Voidwalker things, I think it's important to go over the Void keywords. So the Void subclasses have 6 keywords. 3 of these keywords are buffs to your character, and the other 3 are debuffs to enemy characters. The 3 buff keywords are Devour, Invisibility, and Overshield, whereas the 3 debuff keywords are Suppression, Volatile, and Weaken. In case you didn't know, the buffs are positive effects that you give to you and your teammates, and the debuffs are negative effects that you give to your enemies. The Devour buff makes it so that way anytime you get a kill, it will increase the timer on the buff, fully heal you, and give between 16 and 24% grenade energy back depending on the combatant type that you kill. At base, Devour lasts 10 seconds. With Echo of Persistence, this increases to 15 seconds. The Devour granted by second filaments goes up to 11 seconds instead of 10 seconds. If you combine Echo of Persistence and the second filament Devour, you can get your Devour up to 23 seconds long. Granted, in-game it says 22, but remember 0 is another second in Destiny time. Anytime you get a kill with Devour, it only increases it by 5 seconds until it hits the cap. However, if you have Echo of Persistence, it gives you 8 seconds per kill. Unfortunately, having second filaments doesn't increase the amount that you gain at all. Next up is the Void Invisibility buff. This will make you harder to see and make it so combatants shouldn't shoot at you. Using any ability or shooting will break this invis. However, jumping, sprinting, and strafing won't break your invis. That is, unless you're using Blink, because for some reason in this context, Blink is counted as an ability. In PvP, every 5 seconds you'll ping on the radar for 0.6 seconds. You'll immediately ping the radar when you start sprinting, using your jump ability, or shooting. When you go invisible, enemies will still shoot at the last location that they saw you for a little bit, so when you go invisible, you have to get out of there, otherwise you'll die. This is why a lot of people say invis doesn't work. However, between you and me, there are cases where sometimes enemies will shoot at you while you're invisible, but this shouldn't happen, but it's Destiny 2, what do you want? Unlike Devour, which only has 4 different timers, Void Invisibility has many, so I'll be covering them more when I get around to Night Stalker, the Hunter subclass. However, later in this video, I will be going over Fragments, so we'll talk about Echo of Obscurity when we get there. The final Void buff is Void Overshield. Warlocks don't exactly have a consistent way of getting this other than Repulsor Brace. So like Invis, I'm only going to give a basic rundown. Void Overshield can go up to 45 HP points and has 25% damage resist in PvE. These extra HP points go on top of your shields. Some even say that they go over your shields. A small thing to note is you can't generate this overshield while you already have an overshield. The main reason I bring this up is because Healing Rift gives you a 15 HP overshield while you stand in it. Meaning if you're standing in a Healing Rift and it starts giving you overshield, then you can't gain Void Overshield. So if you're trying to get a Void Overshield, just step out of your Rift for a second. That's a pretty basic rundown of the Overshield. However, if you want a more in-depth breakdown of Void Overshield, I have a guide that goes over overshields and damage resistance, and I'll link it in the description. So now that we've gone over the buffs, let's go over the Void debuffs. Alright, so the first debuff we're going to go over is Suppression. If you come from other games, Suppression is a lot like a Silence. So basically, Suppression does 2 things. It makes it so that way you can't activate any active abilities. So your grenade, melee, class ability, and super can't be used. You also can't use any jump abilities. The second thing Suppression does is it makes it so that way PvE combatants can't fire back at you. However, it should be noted this does not apply to all enemies. For example, if you shoot Rolk with this thing, he's not going to stop attacking you. The second Void debuff is Volatile. What Volatile does is it makes it so that way as you deal more damage to a target, it will slowly build up until it detonates. This deals 160 base damage in PvE, and in PvP it's halved at 80. Volatile will detonate after you take either 200 damage or you die. The final debuff is called Void Weaken. Now, Void Weaken is not the same as other types of Weaken in the game. Void Weaken makes it so that way a target will take 15% extra damage in PvE. In PvP, it's halved to 7.5% extra damage taken. The duration of Void Weaken varies from source to source, however in PvP, all durations are reduced by half. It should also be noted that when you debuff a PvE combatant with Void Weaken, it makes their weapons more inaccurate. This isn't going to stop them from firing, however, they're less likely to hit you. So now that we've covered all the keywords, let's get down to the basics. In terms of basic abilities, Voidwalkers have access to two types of rifts. Healing Rift will heal you for 40 HP a second until you get to full health, in which case you'll generate up to 15 HP points of Overshield. This Overshield is not a Void Overshield. Voidwalkers also have access to Empowering Rift. While standing in an Empowering Rift, you and your allies get 20% increased weapon damage in PvE and 15% increased weapon damage in PvP. Now Voidwalker has access to all of the jump abilities like every other Warlock subclass. However, they also have Blink. Now we all know it's been scientifically proven that Blink is the best jump in the game, but let me tell you about some Blink stats. While the other Warlock jump abilities allow you to glide, Blink will make you teleport a short distance. Blink will teleport you 5.25 meters. With Astrocyte Verse, this is increased to 6.5 meters. With other jump abilities, assuming you keep hitting the ground, you can spam them as much as you want, but Blink works on a charge system. You can carry up to 2 charges at once, and 2.2 seconds after you activate your last Blink, both of these charges are immediately replenished. When you get your Blink charges back, there's a screen wipe and sound effects so that way you know that you got them. Astrocyte Verse's charges are a bit wonky, so Astrocyte Verse kind of makes it so you have 3 charges, but you can't spam them back to back. And also the screen wipe effect isn't actually lined up with you getting your blinks back. This seems like a bug and hopefully it gets fixed in the future. Speaking of Astrocyte Verse, it also decreases your blink cooldown recharge rate by about 16% on average. It also makes it so that way when you come out of blink, you have 100 handling on whatever weapon you have. It also makes it so that way when you blink, your radar stays up the whole time. And finally, it gives plus 30 passive airborne effectiveness. Now technically speaking, the airborne effectiveness doesn't have to be on blink. There have been some funny situations where Dawnblades will run Astrocyte Verse for the airborne effectiveness. But we don't talk about that. So Voidwalker's one and only melee ability is Pocket Singularity. Pocket Singularity is a ranged melee that throws out a ball which will track enemies. Its tracking is strong enough to where it can essentially turn 90 degrees to hit an enemy. When it gets close to a target, it'll detonate, dealing 61 base damage and applying volatile. It also has a pretty strong knockback effect when it goes off. In PvP, when a Guardian gets hit by Pocket Singularity, it will disable their melee lunge for 1 second. In terms of grenades, Voidwalker, much like the other Void subclasses, has access to Axion Bolt, Magnetic Grenades, Scatter Grenades, Spike Grenades, Suppressor Grenades, Void Wall Grenades, and Vortex Grenades. I'm going to be covering these grenades far more in depth when I get around to them in my Discipline stat guide. Okay, now on to the Voidwalker supers. So Voidwalkers have 3 different supers. However, 2 of them are just variations of Nova Bomb. Nova Warp is a roaming super that has 2 main functions. Firstly, its main attack is to charge up a Void Eruption. The Void Eruption does between 201 and 321 base damage, depending on whether or not you charge it. When you cast Nova Warp, it'll automatically do the small eruption of 201 damage. The second function of Nova Warp is that it actually has a built-in blink. You can chain normal blink and Nova Warp's blink back to back to go crazy distances. Also, if you do a burst glide before using Nova Warp's blink, you'll exit the blink with more momentum than you would otherwise. This super has 51% damage resist while it's active, and it has a 556 second base cooldown, also known as 9 minutes and 16 seconds. Alright, now on to the other 2 supers. Both versions of Nova Bomb have 49% damage resist in the casting animation, They both have a 500-second base cooldown, or 8 minutes and 20 seconds. However, Vortex Nova Bomb's impact damage is 1400, whereas the Cataclysm Nova Bomb's base damage is 1501. Upon impact, the Vortex Nova Bomb will perform the big suck to draw enemies into its radius. The damage over time field left behind by the Vortex Nova lasts 7 seconds. It only does 25 damage a tick, however, it ticks a lot more often than other dots. While Cataclysm Nova Bomb doesn't have the Vortex or the suck, it does have Seekers. Now it'll spawn 4 Seekers which each do 301 base damage. Now that we're done with the supers, let's move on to Voidwalker's aspects. Okay, so Voidwalker has 3 aspects. So first, let's go over Feed the Void. All Feed the Void does is make it so that way ability kills will grant you Devour. It's very simple and very straightforward, however, it's also very powerful. This aspect gives you 2 Fragment slots. Chaos Accelerant allows you to overcharge your grenade for increased effects. It only works on 4 Void grenades though. For the Vortex Grenade, it doubles its size and makes it last 25% longer. For Axion Bolt, it changes the amount of bolts spawned from 2 to 3, and it also makes them seek faster. For Scatter Grenades, it makes it so that way the sub-munitions will track onto enemies. And for Magnetic Grenades, it'll turn it into a short-range Void Blast that applies Volatile. Back in Void 2.0, this was known as Handheld Supernova. Chaos Accelerant will only give you 1 Fragment slot. Finally, there's Child of the Old Gods. Child of the Old Gods makes it so that way when you cast your Rift, you get a Void Soul. You can hold a Void Soul for up to 25 seconds. The way a Void Soul works is when you start shooting at an enemy, it will fly out at them. It should be noted that even though the Void Soul tries to find an enemy, sometimes it will put itself in some pretty troll spots. Either way, when it lands, it'll create a 10-meter wide field that will slowly damage enemies and weaken them over time. This field will damage enemies every 0.75 seconds, and it lasts for 13 seconds. Every time it damages an enemy, it will apply a Void Weaken that lasts 5 seconds. It should be noted that this can be refreshed, meaning if an enemy stays in the field, they'll continually be weakened. The duration of this weaken is halved to 2.5 seconds in PvP. Void Soul has a base HP of 150. If you have a Healing Rift, then while an enemy is being drained, you actually get 3.5% grenade and melee energy every 1.4 seconds. However, if you have an Empowering Rift, you'll drain 25 HP every 1.1 seconds. Regardless of what Rift you use, if an enemy dies while being drained by your Void Soul, then you get a third of your Rift back, also known as 33% ability energy. The base damage of Void Soul is 11, however, it should be noted that that's including the weaken effect. The final thing to note is that enemies killed by the Void Soul count as ability kills for Feed the Void. Child of the Old Gods will give you 2 Fragment slots. Alright, so to wrap up the video, I'm going to do a lightning round of all of the fragments. Echo of Dilation increases your crouch speed to 4 meters per second, and you get double the radar resolution while you're crouched. It also gives you plus 10 mobility and plus 10 intellect. Echo of Domineering makes it so that way suppressing an enemy will give you plus 30 mobility for 10 seconds. You can't refresh the buff, but it does give you plus 10 discipline. Echo of Exchange will give you 15% grenade energy upon getting a melee kill. Echo of Expulsion will cause enemies to explode, dealing 130 damage in a 7-meter radius. It should be noted that the farther out from the explosion they are, the less damage they'll take. It also gives you plus 10 intellect. Echo of Harvest makes it so that way precision kills on weakened targets will drop an Orb of Power. This has a 10-second cooldown and takes away 10 intellect. Echo of Instability makes it so that way grenade kills will give you volatile rounds for 10 seconds. Volatile rounds make it so that way your void weapons will apply volatile every time they hit an enemy. This fragment will also give you plus 10 strength. Echo of Leeching makes it so that way melee kills will start health regeneration for you and allies within 12 meters. This also gives you plus 10 resilience. Echo of Obscurity makes it so that way finishers will grant you invisibility for just under 5 seconds. Echo of Persistence will make it so that way overshields will last 5 seconds longer, Devour will last 5 seconds longer, and invis lasts 41.5% longer. Why is it so specific? I don't know. It also takes away 10 points from the stat that governs your class ability. Echo of Provision makes it so that way dealing grenade damage will give you melee energy. However, it varies from grenade to grenade heavily, so your mileage may vary. It also takes away 10 strength. Echo of Remnants makes it so that way grenades that linger last an extra 2 seconds. This is plus 2 seconds that's flat, meaning that Chaos Accelerant won't add the 25% to it, but it will stack on top of Chaos Accelerant. It's just that the 2 seconds won't get the 25% bonus. Echo of Reprisal makes it so that way while you're surrounded by 3 or more enemies within 8 meters, you'll get bonus super energy on a kill. However, again, your mileage may vary because the amount of super energy changes based on how many enemies there are and a bunch of other factors, so it's pretty complicated. There is, however, a 1 second cooldown between each proc. Echo of Starvation makes it so that way picking up an Orb of Power will give you 5 seconds of Devour. It also takes away 10 recovery. And finally, Echo of Undermining makes it so that way Void Grenades will apply Void Weaken on enemies for 5 seconds. This is halved to 2.5 seconds in PvP. It also takes away 20 Discipline. Alright, so that concludes my Voidwalker guide. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and maybe even hit the notification bell. Also, any and all comments and constructive criticism are welcome. If I got anything in this video wrong, let me know. There is one thing that I know isn't quite correct. The Nova Bomb base damage numbers that I have aren't entirely accurate. The reason why is because Nova Bomb is strangely hard to test. The numbers that I used were damage numbers against Guardians. However, if they actually did only 1.4 and 1.5k, they wouldn't be able to pop a Ward of Dawn in PvP, so it's clearly more than advertised. However, I still think that these numbers are useful because it allows us to compare the Nova Bombs between each other. If you're interested, my channel also has other guides. These range from guides on basic stats to speed boost and amplify and other stuff like that. I also do funny moments videos if you guys want to check out that as well. Alright, time for the outro.